The New Orleans Saints beat the Panthers on Sunday to kind of help their chances of winning the NFC South. And while that may sound great and there were some awesome things to come out of it, just like Jimmy Graham scoring another touchdown, the defense having a bounce-back performance, I still want to talk about the quarterback and why there is still some friction in the locker room and whether or not that gets changed or this is just one and done for Derek Carr. All that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Houdat Nation? Welcome back inside a Monday morning edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvogel, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Ficknair, injury lawyers who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore. Scott Ficknair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. So, like I said, Saints won yesterday. We should be very excited about that in the grand scheme of things because obviously a win is a win in the NFL. Now, I'm not going to get yet into the logistics of whether or not it's a good thing for them because I've been very steadfast in my opinion that I think the best thing for the Saints is to kind of have a little bit of a reset and say, man, the staff isn't working. We need to get younger in some key spots. And that's obviously not going to be the case at the moment. The Saints obviously are going to kind of forge ahead in terms of trying to make the playoffs, and that makes sense, right? Everyone's competing for their jobs. They're trying to make sure they have a paycheck come 2024. Totally get it. I'm never going to knock players or coaches for that. It's literally their job to win football games. But what I will say that has become a problem that the Saints just won't address and don't want to fix is the Derek Carr problem. And it goes both ways. Part of it is production. Part of it is leadership. And I think the leadership side to me has become more frustrating than the production standpoint. So from the production standpoint, you're through 13 games this season, and Derek Carr's got 13 touchdown passes, 7 interceptions. 7 interceptions is fine. I said before the season started, if Derek Carr had like 27 touchdowns and 12 picks, that would be a good year for him. And look, he's pretty much on pace for those 12 picks, probably a little bit less, right? I think Derek's probably on pace for like 10 interceptions. So in terms of that, that's fine. No one's going to be mad about 10 interceptions in a season. That's actually a really good number. The touchdowns, though, 13. We've had those moments where he struggles in the red zone. Obviously, that's not ideal. And you go back to yesterday before the Saints really, really started just pull away from the Panthers because, God, the Panthers might be the worst team I've seen in maybe 5-10 years. I have no idea. It was a bad performance, 37 passing yards through the first 50-something minutes. And, look, he gets hit. Offensive line was terrible yesterday. I was one of the first ones to talk about the pass protection and saying, like, hey, look, it was not good. That was some week one type of shit from the offensive line. But he gets into it with McCoy. They kind of bark at each other. And after the game, Eric McCoy takes accountability, says it was uncharacteristic of himself. He overreacted. He shouldn't have done that. It was a heat of the moment type thing. Derek Carr has two things to say. One is he tells a reporter, I'm done being negative with you, brother. And then also said that, they were both right. They were both wrong. I mean, I don't care for that response. Maybe I'm being, nitpicky with it, but that's that for me. You're the quarterback. You're supposed to be the face of the franchise. Just take the blame. Just take the blame. Players will appreciate that. Your teammates will appreciate that. And the bigger issue I have is this isn't a isolated incident. If this was an isolated incident, I promise you I would not be talking about it today. But this is about the 5th time this year that we've had this type of issue with Derek Carr. Week 1, he got on Trevor Penning's ass for Trevor Penning screwing up. And Penning was god-awful in week 1. And to some degree, we were like, okay, I get it. Carr doesn't want to get hurt. It is what it is. Then the Thursday night game opened up a lot of eyes, right, where he blames Olave. Guess what happened after that game? Olave, when asked about it, said, you could put the blame on me. Derek Carr, meanwhile, did a whole speech and rant about how, he's just an emotional guy and, that's the way he approaches things, but he has to realize that he's on a new team and maybe guys don't want to hear that. All right, fine. That same game, he blasted Pete Carmichael on the sideline. Now, some of us praised him for it because we can't stand Pete Carmichael. Okay, that's fine. But he blasted him on the sideline. Didn't say anything about that after the game. Actually, I believe he decided to act like he wasn't yelling at Pete Carmichael as if the cameras didn't literally show him yelling at Pete Carmichael. So we have that. We have the Michael Thomas situation on Twitter. Now, that doesn't involve directly, him and Michael Thomas exchanging words. But Michael Thomas feels like, hey, I could trash my quarterback on social media, and that's okay. And maybe to some degree, he feels like he's justified for doing so because he doesn't like Derek Carr. And I don't know if that's the truth, but he would never tweet that about other players, specifically the quarterback spot, unless he felt so. So when I look at this Derek Carr situation, you're the quarterback. It's on you to make sure that everyone's on the same page. It's on you to make sure that people aren't barking at each other every week. And look, yesterday was bad pass protection. I can understand the frustration, but it comes with the game. At some level, you're showing up your teammates. So when you're not producing well, you're not being liked in the locker room because you decided I'm going to show up my teammate whenever I can, and you've lost the fan base, which might be the most important thing. That's why I asked the question, are the Saints going to admit that Derek Carr was a mistake? And if so, does that make him one and done in New Orleans as a starter? Like, I don't know if they could get rid of this contract after the first year. I don't think they will be able to. $52 million in dead cap. You're keeping Derek Carr for another year. But you don't necessarily have to tie your hands down to him as a starter if this continues. Because I don't know what quarterback in the NFL gets a long leash for being unaccountable, unproductive, and just doesn't have any loyalty or trust from the fan base. Because that's done. It's broken. And I speak as someone who is more of a fan than I am like someone as a commentator. I do think to some degree that the fan base will never, ever like Derek Carr again. There will be fans that can get back on the train. There will be fans that will say, hey, Derek Carr, you showed me a couple of good games in a row. I'm back on. But there's a large contingency of Saints Twitter that I don't think ever is going to like Derek Carr again. And I would know. I read the tweets nonstop. I'm on Twitter all the time, obviously. I feel like I got a decent pulse of where the Who Dat Nation's at. He does not have any trust from the fans, and he hasn't earned it. I think when you show a certain level of accountability, fans will appreciate that. And you know why we are spoiled by Drew Brees' presence? We're spoiled by, we know what a franchise quarterback looks like and what he talks like, so we know what's not it. And we know it's not Derek Carr because the productivity's not there, but more importantly, the leadership's not there. I've never, ever seen Drew Brees throw a teammate under the bus in a press conference. I've never seen him have sideline spat after sideline spat with a teammate. This guy, Derek Carr, does it once a week. And the press conference is always the same nonsense. So I'm not expecting to be Drew Brees. There's only one Drew Brees. And they don't grow on trees, and it's very hard to get a guy like that. But Derek Carr, man, you can't be unaccountable. You can't be unproductive. And you can't have the entire Who Dat Nation hating you. Yet somehow you've managed to do all those three. We still have 4 games left this season. So we'll see what happens. But I am fascinated to see what goes down with Derek Carr. Because I do think, to some degree, I don't know how you run it back. Fans are going to be furious. They absolutely hate his guts. And some of it's warranted. Maybe some of it's a little bit too much, but it's something to talk about. So I want to get into Jimmy Graham and what's been going on with good old number 80. Because yesterday, while it was awesome once again to see him get in the end zone, it was also a little frustrating. So Jimmy Graham in week 3 scores a touchdown against the Packers in Green Bay in the red zone off a slant. Some promise there. All right, you brought him in to be a red zone weapon. He could still do his thing. Awesome. And then for some reason, from the days October 20th to December 2nd, Jimmy Graham was inactive. No explanation, no rhyme or reason, nothing. He was just inactive. So from that stretch, October 20th to December 2nd, Saints felt like he was no use. Then the Saints started playing him again, and now Jimmy Graham's gone back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. And Jimmy Graham only has 4 catches this year, but 3 of them are touchdowns, and 1 was a very, very high pass from Derek Carr that I think only Jimmy Graham can snatch out of any NFL player. So if he's playing well, and we see he still has usage and gives them value in the red zone, what the fuck were the Saints staff sitting him for? What was the reason? And we don't have one. We're not getting one. There's no explanation. There's almost like a whoopsie. Sorry. We forgot that this 6'6" basketball player who was an amazing tight end for us for a ton of years, we forgot he's on the roster. That's what it feels like. I don't understand it. I'm happy for Jimmy Graham. Seeing Jimmy Graham turn back the clock the last 2 weeks has been phenomenal. And if you watch him, whether it was him shaking the Lions defender last week or this week, kind of breaking off his route and going into the open space, Jimmy could still get it done in the red zone. Jimmy should be active the rest of the season. Jimmy probably will get in the end zone at least one more time before the season's over. But it makes you wonder, right? You were struggling in the red zone for a long stretch this year. Your quarterback was struggling in the red zone for a long stretch this year. And you didn't think, we should probably get some targets for Jimmy Graham? It took mid-December for them to figure it out. That's just crazy to me. Absolutely crazy. But that's where we're at with this team. That is where we're absolutely at. And it's wild because to some degree, I really rather just celebrate Jimmy Graham right now. You know, the player, the person, the saint that he's been for this team. It's great to see him score in the Superdome again. And he looks fantastic. He looks in great shape. The guy hasn't aged a day. But, my mind goes to why the hell was he sitting this whole time? And I almost want to laugh more than I want to get frustrated. But it makes you wonder. And I hope at some point we get an explanation. Even if it's them going, we fucked up. He should have been active. But some explanation. And I don't know if we'll get it. But Jimmy's been awesome. And I would not be surprised if Jimmy gets in the end zone again next week against the Giants. Just the way Jimmy's been playing in the red zone, the guy looks sharp. So, the last thing I want to get into before I pull up any comments that you guys have on this Monday morning, going to be relatively short in general because, yesterday was one of the most uninspired wins I've seen from a Saints team. And in reality, until they show us good football or they show us really bad football, there's not much. We're kind of in this neutral position. But this neutral position could be good enough to talk about the NFC South and them winning it. And it poses the question, is the NFC South heating up for the Saints, or is it just false hope for us? And I'm assuming if you guys watch me a lot here, on Brew Crew Media's YouTube page, you probably know where I'm at. I don't think the Saints are legit. I don't think winning the NFC South does them any good. Did anyone watch the Cowboys-Eagles game yesterday and think that if the Saints play the Cowboys in the first round, they'd have a shot? Because if the Cowboys and Eagles both went out, the Eagles would have the tiebreaker because of NFC record. So, would you feel confident if the Saints won the division and then played the Cowboys the first week of the playoffs? I wouldn't. I think they would get just absolutely clowned. Eagles, they're in a rut right now. Losses to the Niners, losses to the Cowboys, obviously not great, but they're still 10-3 and they're still really talented and they're really good in the trenches. I think that would be a terrible matchup. And we know the Saints cannot play well against Jalen Hurts. They've struck out twice against the guy. So I think for them, that would obviously be a terrible matchup too. So I don't see how making the playoffs really does them any good other than keeping people's jobs. And they're going to keep people's jobs who people don't want those jobs to be kept. No one wants Dennis Allen back. No one wants Pete Carmichael back. But a playoff appearance could do that. And I would be cool with it if I felt like they'd have a legit shot in the wild card round. I feel like they'd have no shot against the Cowboys, no shot against the Eagles. So it's more a false hope. But let's just be objective and not subjective and talk about the schedules and the reality that all three teams that are in the hunt have relatively decent schedules. So let's start off with the Falcons. They have the Panthers this Sunday. If the Panthers play the way they played this week, the Panthers will lose that one. The Falcons will take a little bit of an edge there and get to 7 wins. After that, they have the Colts. That's a tough game. The Colts are a very good, very solid football team. The Colts win was the best win of the year for the Saints, no doubt about it. Colts are 7-6, really competitive. I can see the Falcons losing that game. So that would get them to 7-8, I believe, if my math serves me correctly. Then they got the Bears. The Bears one is interesting. What week are you getting Justin Fields at? If it's this week's Justin Fields, Falcons probably lose that game. If it's Justin Fields a couple weeks ago, maybe that Monday night game against the Vikings, maybe the Falcons win that game. So that one seems like a toss-up. But either way, then you come back to that Saints game in the Dome, and that feels like that could be winner takes the division. As for the Bucs, they have the Packers next Sunday. That won't be an easy game. They have the Jaguars after that. That won't be an easy game. And then they have the Saints and then the Panthers. So the Bucs, in theory, if they lose the next 2 but win their last 2, they'll have a shot at 8-9, which seems like that's what the division winner might be. And then we have the Saints. Giants next Sunday should win. Will they? We'll see, but they should win. Rams, I think that'll be a loss, so that gets them to 7-8. And then you have Bucs and Falcons. If you win both of them, 9-8, the Saints will make the playoffs. If you lose one, win one, I don't know how the tiebreakers are going to go down, but you most likely miss the playoffs in that scenario. Now we'd have to see how the tiebreakers go. I believe if they lose the Bucks one and win the Falcons one, but let's say the Bucks win the Saints and Panthers game at the end of the year, I think the Buccaneers would get in. Because I think the Buccaneers would have the best conference record, best division record out of the bunch. So we'll see how it all falls. 8-9 seems to be the division winner at the moment. As I look at these schedules, I don't think any of these teams get to 9 wins. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just the way it feels to me. But I'll say this about the Saints. I do think if the Saints lose to the Giants next week, it's over. Like, I think if the Saints lose to the Giants and they fall to 6-8 and you got that Rams game looming, I think it's over. I think the Saints will finally just fall off, and we'll see the implosion that a lot of us have been saying, let's just get it over with so we can get rid of Dennis Allen. If they beat the Giants, you're at 7-7. They're going to try and sell us on this team being a playoff team, and we're just going to say, you know what, there's 3 weeks left. Let's get this shit over with, and that's fine. That's also okay. But I do think that's where it's at. I think that Giants game, if it is a loss, all right, now the Saints are in trouble. If it's a win, we'll see. But I look at the Bucks and the Falcons. I don't think either team's going to pull away. So the Saints can realistically lose the next 2 and possibly still have a shot. I expect them to win 1, lose 1, beat the Giants, lose to the Rams. But do you expect the Falcons, like I said, to run away with the Panthers, Colts, Bears games? No. Panthers, yes. Colts, Bears, no. Do you expect the Bucks to run away with the Packers or Jaguars? Absolutely not. So I think we look at this NFC South. I think it's obviously a really bad division. That's stating the obvious. But I also think that in the grand scheme of things, none of these teams are going to be good enough to get to over 500. And that's a sad thing for a lot of these teams because, we complain about the Saints. The other 2 teams are in similar spots, right? Don't have their quarterback of the future. Whoever wins this division is going to screw up their draft pick. And none of these 3 teams, I don't think any of them know if they even like their coach. Bowles, I don't think the Bucks like him. Arthur Smith, the guy, it's week to week. Does he play Bijan or not? And that's how Falcons fans kind of dictated. And then us Saints fans, we know we don't like Dennis Allen. So it's weird. You got 3 teams vying for 1 spot, and I don't like any of them in terms of how they play. I don't like any of them. So we'll see how this all unfolds. It'll be interesting. Had the Falcons won yesterday, Falcons probably would have wrapped this thing up. But Falcons lost because no one wants to actually win this division. So we leave it at week 14, where we talk about it being open and whether or not we think the Saints can get it done. So I'll get into any comments you guys have, Saints related, NFL related, whatever it might be. Before I do that, though, I just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook.
In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code BOOT. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code BOOT. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Bonus bets expired 168 hours after issuance. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/basketball terms.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. So, like I said, going to be a relatively light Monday morning episode as we talk about the Saints, talk about Jimmy Graham, talk about, Derek Carr, all that stuff. I think for them, you're looking at a weird spot. You got 4 games left. We'll see how it goes. I think next Sunday will be quite telling. So we're going to get into stuff here. Tramal says, Chris, it's false hope for the Saints. Watch what happens next week against the Giants. So I said yesterday, if the Saints play the Giants the way they played the Panthers yesterday, they will lose. Giants defensive line is legit. Giants obviously have an explosive back in Saquon Barkley with some emerging guys in Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson. So they have some weapons. We'll see. I'm still on the fence about Tommy DeVito, though. I don't know. Can he come into the Dome and beat the Saints? We'll see. If Tyrod Taylor was in there, maybe I think a little bit better of the Giants. But who knows? If the Giants beat the Packers on Monday Night Football tonight, they get to 5 wins. Giants will have a lot more to play for against the Saints. Because if the Giants get to 6-8 next week, let's say they beat the Packers and beat the Saints, they're vying for that final wild card spot, as wild as that sounds. But that's the way the NFC's been this year. Joshua Denham says, good morning. I wish Eric McCoy would have punched Carr in the eyeliner. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's other people that wish that too. I think at this point we're all fed up with Derek Carr. And we know he's going to do it at least one more time before this season ends. He shows up his teammates. He's a fake leader. He's got his brother blocking everyone on Twitter. I didn't even tweet anything at his brother. I saw his brother block me, which I guess, sure, I tweeted negative things about Derek Carr. Maybe that justified it. But the Carr family is exhausting. Exhausting. And I'm so over this. Like, if the Brees family is the royal family in New Orleans, I don't know what the Carr family is. But I'm very much tired of hearing about them. Jerry G saying, morning, Chris. Eric saying, who dat fam? Also saying Carr is really arrogant. I agree. It's typical with him. Jeremy says, if Carolina was even remotely competent on offense and didn't go 1 for 7 on fourth down, this game is very different. It was 14-6 into the fourth, and one of those touchdowns was a block, punt, scoop, and score. I agree. Look, and I'm very happy that a lot of Saints reporters are talking about it. This win has to be viewed as a whole, not as just looking at the box score. Look at the game. Did you actually watch the Saints game and come away impressed? Absolutely not. They couldn't stop the run. Their pass game was terrible. Their pass protection was terrible. Derek Carr was awful for 50 minutes. Had the interception at the end of the first half. They decided to go away from what was working, which was running the football with Alvin and Jamal. You are lucky that the Panthers stink, that Bryce Young was uncomfortable, that Bryce Young missed a ton of open receivers, that the Panthers shot themselves in the foot every time, that they missed a field goal within 30 yards. Like, these are all things that happened yesterday. And any other team plays that version of the Saints, they would win. Every single one. The Patriots, the Cardinals, the Giants, the Titans. You think of a bad team, they would have beat yesterday's Saints team. The Panthers are that bad that they just couldn't do it. And not only could they not do it, they actually, towards the end, scoreboard-wise, it looks like they got blown out. But like you said, for those who watched the game, we know how poorly they played. We know it's no surprise. Goonie300 says, Dennis Allen comes to the mic and says Chris Olave ran the wrong route. But when it was time for him to talk about Carr, he said, we're not going to play the blame game. Yeah, and I can't stand it. He said, we're not going to play the blame game. Yesterday, he told reporters to stop making a big deal out of it. Your quarterback, who you handpicked, is constantly bitching at his teammates. It is worth addressing. You can't constantly sweep it under the rug. You can't. Jerry G says, we're in a 3-way tie now with a 6-7 record, so there's no excuse that nobody will ruin my start of the week, especially after a Saints win. Hey, look, like I said, for fans can do whatever you want. If you're glad they're in a 3-way tie, you be happy about that. You're not happy about them potentially winning the NFC South because you want Dennis Allen gone. You're in every right to be happy about that or mad about that, whatever the feeling might be or the emotion of the day. But I'm just talking solely about the team. Like, it's how they can sit here and be proud of the product they put out there is crazy. It's terrible. It's terrible. And I'd expect the Superdome to have another preseason vibe next week with the way this product's been. Eric says, this is Dennis Allen's QB. DA a problem child. He needs to deal with him. Look, I don't know what to add to that other than I agree. I think Derek Carr has been a problem with his behavior all season long, but it doesn't get addressed because that's his quarterback. Jerry G says Eagles got exposed Sunday night. Yeah, I think so. Look, I think the Eagles are still a great team, though. I think that in the reality, 2 really tough games, right? Home against the Niners, who I think the Niners are the best team in football, and I don't think it's close personally. You lose that one. Niners obviously playing with a lot of motivation because of what happened last year in the NFC Championship game with Brock Purdy getting hurt. So you lose that one. And then you got to come around after you play the Niners and versus the Cowboys. And when you play the Niners, you usually get the shit kicked out of you because they're so physical. And the Cowboys, extra rest, right? They played the following Thursday, so they had 10 days to prepare for that one. Dallas was at home. They don't really lose at home. I just think it's a bad storm. I think the Eagles will win their last 4 games of the year. They got Seahawks, Giants, Cardinals, Giants. I think they're going to win all 4. And that will get them to 14-3. So are they a little fraudulent? Maybe. But they're still probably going to be vying for the 1 seed, which is just nuts. Cherry G says the Chiefs got exposed more, though. Dude, I'll keep it short, but Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes saying like that's the worst call they've ever seen, that changed the outcome of the game. Fuck you, man. Fuck you. You have gotten so many calls during this Mahomes run, and they'll continue to because that's just when you have a great quarterback, you get a lot of favorable calls. To sit here and bitch and put this loss on the refs when Kadarius Toney's lined up a good yard ahead of everyone. Why are you blaming the refs? Kadarius Toney has screwed the Chiefs more than any other person this year for Kansas City. More than any ref, more than any coach, more than any player, Kadarius Toney has been the one to screw over the Chiefs. So why don't you put the blame on him instead of being like, well, they took away greatness? What, because it was a nice play? The refs can't call what was clearly a penalty on Kadarius Toney? Come on. And Mahomes got to be better too. Mahomes is the face of the league. He can't be sitting there, hold me back. I'm about to rush at the ref. The Saints in 2018 literally had a Super Bowl trip stripped away from them. Not a single player thought about decking the ref. Be better. Be better. And you have to be better. You're the face of the league. You can't act like that. And then after the game, you're talking to Josh Allen, and you're instead of congratulating him on the win or see you later or whatever, worst fucking call I've ever seen is what he says. Bro, Josh Allen had to watch his defense give up a playoff game with 13 seconds left. He's not the guy you should go complaining to. I just thought it was lame. And I love Mahomes. I think Mahomes is great for the league. Mahomes is a once-in-a-generation talent. But to blame the refs, you've gotten every call throughout your career. Last year's Super Bowl ended with a holding penalty. Come on, man. I thought that was beyond lame. Eric says, out of the three, we'll see who can jump out of the dumpster fire and stop, drop, and roll and win the NFC South. That's probably the best way of putting it. Goonie 300 says, bro, you and Nick Underhill, the only ones putting pressure on the organization for us. I don't think so. I think there's more. I think I'm trying to think right now of who put out a really good piece yesterday. There was a really, really good piece that I really liked, and I'll try and find it. But I think Kat Terrell's done a really good job. She's been applying a lot of pressure on DA, a lot of pressure on Derek Carr. She's kind of been getting stuffed, but she's been doing a good job of asking the hard questions. Rod Walker's been fantastic. Rod Walker yesterday tweeted, the Saints will probably get out of here with a win today, but if they're playing any other team in the league, they wouldn't. That's putting pressure. So I got to give credit to Rod Walker, give credit to Kat Terrell. Brooke and Mike from New Orleans Football have done a fantastic job as well. I think they've seen the shift, and I think a lot of them are really applying the pressure. And that's good. Like yesterday, I think the Saints thought because they won, they'd be able to go to the podium and just say we won and we're tied for first. And it doesn't work that way. When you shit the bed for 50 minutes against the worst team in the NFL, we're going to have questions. And the reporters clearly had the questions, and they asked some damn good ones. Alex said, did you see yesterday's postgame comments from Mickey talking about how it's not about what you do, but who you do it with? Told me all I need to know about DA's future. Yep, I saw it. I don't even know how to address it anymore. The reality is I talk about DA's got to go. Pete Carmichael's got to go. Mickey Loomis has to go too, and I don't think he will. And I think we're stuck. I think as Saints fans, we are stuck right now because Mickey Loomis rather lose with his friends than win with new people. And that's a terrible place to be in. Terrible place to be in. Misdemeanor says, I don't want the Saints in the playoffs, especially versus the Cowboys. I'd have to fight hourly. Yeah, I don't want it either. They'd get their ass kicked, absolutely kicked by the Cowboys, and then we got to get trolled by Dallas fans? No, thank you. I'm good on that. Jerry G says, Kadarius Toney cost the Chiefs to win from his foot stepping on the blue line. He did. Jeremy says division winner gets Cow's division winner gets Cow's first round and dog walked. Prize, mid-teens pick, and continued life in the dumpster. All pass. Thanks. I agree. Who the hell wants to play the Cowboys first round, get absolutely rocked, and then they're like, oh, by the way, you're going to be picking 19 or 20 instead of 11. No, thank you. Give me pick 11. Jerry G says now Eagles and Cowboys are tied with a 10-3 record after Sunday night. Yep. It's definitely heating up. But if you look at Dallas' schedule and Philly's schedule, I think Philly will win the NFC East. Dallas has to play the Bills. They got to play the Dolphins. I believe they also got to play the Lions. So their schedule's a little bit more challenging than Philly's. Misdemeanor Crime says, Jerry, I live up here with all these freaking head case Cowboys fans. That's tough. Whoever wins this division plays the first place schedule next season and is sure to be a dumpster dweller. Yep. I don't know if you guys seen the projected schedule for the Saints next year. they are going to get just absolutely rocked, like on a weekly basis. I'll just put that out from now. It is going to be a really tough schedule for them. So if we think it's bad this year, DA with next year's schedule could be a absolute shit show for this team. Jeremy says, whole division coaching changes incoming, question mark? Maybe. I mean, we know the Panthers got to change a coach. I'd imagine at least one more of the NFC South teams will change coach. All of them should change their coaches, though. All 4 teams need new coaches. Misdemeanor Crime says, hell, Danny DeVito would beat the Saints next week. I mean, honestly, with the way they played, sure. Trayvon King says, why has Trevor Penning been completely banished to the shadow realm? Are they transitioning him to guard? I keep seeing Landon Young check in, and it's terrific every time. I don't know. Reporters spoke to Trevor Penning this past week. He talked about it being difficult, not playing, him being benched, but it doesn't seem like we're getting any answers there. Alex says, what's your MVP prediction? Seems like it'll come down to Dak versus Purdy. If Dak continues to ball with their brutal final stretches of games, he's my pick. Out of the 2, sure, I'd give it to Dak. I'll give you the sleeper. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I'm not saying the NFL will do that. But the Bills have a chance over the next 4 games, to make the playoffs. And if the Bills go down and beat Kansas City, which they just did, then beat the Cowboys, then beat the Chargers, then beat the Patriots, then beat the Dolphins, and get into the playoffs by just going on a 5-game win streak to end the season, I think that Josh Allen's got a shot. And the reason I say that is I think Josh Allen has more responsibility on him than Dak, more responsibility on him than Brock Purdy. Now, if you want my opinion, who do I think should get MVP? I actually think it should be Tyreek Hill. That's just my opinion. I think Tyreek Hill should be the MVP of the league this year with what he's done for Miami's offense. But I know it's not going to go to a non-quarterback. So right now, I would give it to Dak. But I'll tell you, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens if the Bills win their next 4. Because if they win the next 4, that means that Josh probably goes on a heater. And if Josh Allen goes on a heater, NFL is going to have an interesting decision to make. So we'll just go from there. But I think it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. Eric says the Carr family are the Grinches that stole Christmas from the Houdat Nation. Feels that way. It absolutely feels that way. Jamal says Bryce Young was running good against the Saints. He ran well, like most quarterbacks do against the Saints, you know? So I think that if you're a mobile quarterback, you play the Saints, you're going to have about 40 rushing yards. That's what it kind of feels like, maybe even more. And I don't think that's going to change. But it's because the D-line's kind of slow. I think for New Orleans, it's been their Achilles heel for years, right? Like, when's the last time we felt good about them versus a mobile quarterback? I can't remember. Jamal says Mike Triplett asks good questions. Mike's great. Mike's been great for so long. And yes, Mike's been asking some hard-hitting questions. Doesn't mean he's going to get the answer because, let's be real, Carr and DA aren't great at the podium, but he asked some great questions. Misdemeanor Crime says, just because they won yesterday does not excuse the poor season performance. I agree. Totally agree. Eric says Mahomes is a spoiled brat. Look, I love Mahomes. Big fan of him. I think he does some great things outside the community, but yesterday was lame. You lost. How many times have you guys beaten the Bills? Really, you lose finally, and we're pinning it on the ref when Kadarius Toney clearly wasn't lined up correctly. Just be better and win next week. But it felt to me like that was just some frustration boiling over from other things outside of just that call from the ref. And it could be because the Chiefs offense is struggling this year without Eric Bieniemy. This Chiefs offense has not found a legitimate wide receiver to break away from the pack and be that go-to guy. And maybe that's where all this frustration stems from. But I thought it was a bad look. Jamal says Gail Benson gave Mickey the game ball yesterday, so he isn't going anywhere. Yep, I agree. He's staying put. Mr. Beater Crime says we play the NFC East and AFC West next year. Correct. Those are the 2 divisions they play. So got to worry about the Chiefs, got to worry about the Chargers, got to worry about the Broncos. So Sean Payton's going to want to get his revenge. Got to worry about the Cowboys, got to worry about the Eagles. So it's going to be interesting. The NFL would rather have Josh Allen or Burrow as the face of the league over Mahomes and Dak. Well, I don't think Dak needs to be the face of the league because Dak is the face of the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are like their own separate entity in terms of how popular that brand is. So you don't need Dak to be the face of the league because He's the face of the Cowboys, and that alone is going to print a lot of money. And Dak is a very good face for the Cowboys because he always says the right things. He's going to be consistent. That's good for them. But I think Mahomes remains the face of the league. I just think it was a really bad look yesterday. And look, it happens, right? How many times did Tom Brady throw, a tantrum in his career? Too many to count. So it's all about making sure this doesn't become a regular thing for Mahomes because you can't have the face of the league looking like he wants to square up with the refs. It's admirable because the refs sometimes deserve to be squared up with, but not in that moment. They made the right call, and your team lost, and all you can do is go back out there next week and ball out. That's really all you can do. Alex says Broncos only a game back of Kansas City for the division now. Sean Payton deserves Coach of the Year consideration. I agree with that wholeheartedly, but I think there's a lot of coaches that deserve consideration. I think O'Connell from the Vikings deserves consideration. I think McDaniel will obviously be in the running for that. There's no doubt about that. Dan Campbell, no. I think the Lions are really starting to prove that they're a little bit fraudulent, so I would take them out of the picture. Trying to think around elsewhere in the league. DeMeco Ryans, I think DeMeco Ryans, with what he's done with the Texans, if they make the playoffs, that's a contender. Shane Steichen with the Colts, that's another contender. So there's a lot of options, but Sean should be one of them, no doubt about it. Misdemeanor Crime saying Bieniemy's absence is glaring in Kansas City. It seems that way. I don't think it's getting talked about enough. Everyone keeps talking about the receivers. Like, all right, last year's squad, they had Juju. And yeah, sure, Juju's a respectable receiver, but he's not who he used to be with Pittsburgh. So it's not like you lost this all-time great receiver, this all-pro. You should be better, or you should be at least the same, and they're not, and part of it's because you don't have Bieniemy. Trayvon says, remember when the Saints played with swag and we're going to whoop your ass every down mentality? What the hell happened to that? I don't know. It went out the window once they lost Sean. That's what it felt like. Lob City says, the stat padding to make yesterday's win look like a blowout is crazy work. They can say whatever they want. That's what it was. We know what it was. Wanted to make his numbers look better. And as a result, you get Derek Carr acting like they had a good game. And by the way, Derek Carr was asked about his performance to grade it, and he responded, we won. Dude, you can't be sassy with the reporters every time. You just can't. Eric says Sean Payton's doing Sean Payton things in Denver. I agree. Like, that's what happens. Sean's a great coach. Coaching matters in this league. That's what you get. You pay for good coaching, you're going to get good results. They were 0-3. They were also 1-5 at one point. They're now 7-6. Jeremy says, if dreams could really come true, who is your first-round pick and next head coach? Mine's Ben Johnson and Jaden Daniels. Less than zero hope. Ben Johnson would be in the group for me in terms of guys I'd be interested in. Bobby Slowick from the Texans would be another one. But quarterback, in terms of, I think Jaden would be awesome for this team. Because you can't get Caleb, you can't get Drake May. Jaden's going to go top 7, though, in my opinion. So you'd have to trade up. But I'd do that. I would absolutely do that. I'd take that duo. I'd also take Bobby Slowick, though, as the head coach, if, let's say, they didn't go Ben Johnson. But I would agree with Jaden. That's who I'd like to see as the quarterback. Joshua says I'm seriously fully relive the entire Aaron Brooks era rather than glance at Derek Carr's immature, sassy, fraudulent ass one more time. Well, I'm sure you're not alone. I'm sure you are not alone in that belief. But that's who our quarterback is, right? A guy who is unproductive, unaccountable, and likes to talk his shit, even though he's been a shit teammate. But that's where we're at. And he's not going to get reprimanded because his coach loves him. But so be it. We got 4 more games left. We'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. And we'll see. We'll absolutely see how that plays out. Trayvon says, I think DA is realizing speed is much needed for the pass rush. Bond has been a nice addition next to Granderson. Hopefully consider that in the draft this year. I totally agree with you on that. It is frustrating, though, right? It took that long to realize Bond should be rushing the passer. Like, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? You're a defensive guy. You should know where they should be. Lob 32 City says it's crazy because if Week 17 comes down to winning it in versus Atlanta, the entire city is going to show out to help them boys make the playoffs. DA and DC are going to think we're supporting them. I don't know. I don't know. We got to see how the next couple of games play out. I think Saints fans are checked out in terms of just going to the Superdome. But I do agree, if it is to get in the playoffs, they will show up because New Orleans is always going to support the city. That fan base is going to support the city. But let's see. If they lose to the Giants, all bets are off there. Because if you lose to the Giants and you play the Rams, shit probably goes south. We shall see. But anyway, guys, 4 games left this season. Giants, Rams, Bucks, Falcons. We'll see how this plays out. Do the Saints make a run towards the division? Do they back their way into the division? Or they just back their whole way out of the playoff contention and get a better draft pick? It's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds, and we'll be here to cover it on the Straight Up Saints podcast for Boot Crew Media. So make sure to subscribe. Stay tuned for more content in the future. We'll have a preview episode of the Giants coming up very soon, so we'll talk about that. And we shall see. I'll be back here next Sunday, obviously, when they finish that game. I think it's going to be interesting as hell. I think the Giants are going to give them a good fight. But we got 2 Monday night games. That's where my focus is going to go towards. And we'll see what happens. So enjoy your Monday, guys. I hope you guys have a great start to your week. We'll be back here soon on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.